So here we are with the nitty-gritty about job shadowing in 2023. There's going to be some important information, so I'll try and make it as clear as possible for what hopefully will be a really great experience for your child or children next summer. Sorry, the picture here is the best I could find that's inclusive, but unfortunately it's still got a bloke in a suit and a girl in a pink dress. We don't know what our children are going to be like in the future or what jobs will exist. We're probably preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist, rather like when I was a kid. There was no such thing as a social media influencer. The internet didn't exist. The digital world didn't exist, and now we have massive opportunities in those areas. So work has expanded in all sorts of different ways, and who knows, by the time our children who are currently in year 10 are starting to pick at a job in 12, 18, 24 months time, it could be in an area that we don't yet know exists. But we do know that whatever they want to be, they do want to be employable. And employable isn't just about having good qualifications. I've already emphasized this to them. It's about having those soft skills which allow you to progress within work. Your qualifications will open doors for you and get you invited into the party, but whether you stay depends on those things like teamwork, communication, resilience and initiative. And I've tried to stress this with the students, and particularly I want to make this point now to you as parents to help get the message over to the students. Finding a work experience, a job shadowing placement can be hard, and perhaps your child has got a desire to work in the future with animals or in finance, but they can't get a placement in those areas, and all they've got is something in an area that they wouldn't consider. It's really important that they take whatever placement they can, because wherever they are, they can develop those soft skills of teamwork, communication, etc. Even if it's doing something that they wouldn't choose to do, they still have to turn up, they have to be punctual, they have to hear instructions, follow instructions, pass messages on to others, keep going when they don't like what they're doing, show initiative, all those sorts of things. So any job shadowing placement is better than none at all. And they will possibly get disheartened along the way as they're looking for the right placement and they're trying to get one in the field where they want to get one. And they might just have to take one where it's not what they want, but they still will get valuable experience. And when I talk about experience, we're really pleased that last year we got 95, 90, maybe 98% of the year group out into a placement, and we got some feedback from them, and I wanted to share some of that with you to show how valuable doing the job shadowing is. So here's somebody who went to a hairdresser's, and yeah, the hardest thing was they stained their jeans, yeah. But their learning, they said, was that they found something that they could enjoy. Clearly a student who wondered what the point of school is, doesn't always enjoy being here, but on their job shadowing placement they found their niche. And we hope for all of the kids that they can start to see something of themselves in their future selves in their job placements. Somebody went to maybe a first school and they struggled with staying there the whole day. Well, welcome to my world. I'm recording this and it's late on a Friday night when I know it's going to be quiet, so I'm not going to be interrupted. But the learning here for the student, they actually found that they could do something like this. It gave them a confidence boost. Somebody went to work in a pub and yeah, they struggled to change a carling barrel. Why a carling barrel and not Doom Bar or Guinness? There are other beers available, but they're learning. Look at that. To be able to do a good job, you need to be able to speak to people and do what you're told without complaining. I don't know whether this meant that they were given a little talking to because they were complaining, or they observed it in something else. But what a life lesson there is there. Nothing that the teacher told them or the parents told them. They picked it up from being on a job placement. Sonny went to a factory. They spent a lot of time cutting up aluminium blocks, and the simple learning was, gosh, work is tough. Yeah, welcome to the world. Here's a good one I like. Estate agents. Hardest thing, those difficult customers on the phone. But if you work as a team, communicate and take initiative, things will go well. So there's great learning to be had for getting your kids onto a job placement wherever they go. So job shadowing at South Bromsgrove means 3 or 5 days in a workplace, and the students have the role of a trainee or employee. It's only 3 days if they're doing D of E, and I know you'll have questions about that, which I'll explain a bit later. These are the dates. They're on the paperwork, so you don't have to write them down, or you can watch this back again. It's that week, those 5 days in July, when Year 9 do activities and Year 10 will be doing their 2 D of E camps. They do one each, but half the first half of the week and half the second half. The Year 11 come back and do their silver camp, and the Year 12s are off on camp as well. Now, students with their family and in their networks, they have to find the placement. It's not the school doing it, so it's really important to start looking now. And I've got something to say now, really important, about the students finding the placement. This is legally classed as a private arrangement if the student or their family arrange the placement and the school has nothing to do with it. And that's really important on a legal footing. I'll explain now in a moment, because if we don't arrange it, then there's no need for us to check on the placements. This means that we can't recommend placements. We can't say, oh, that would be a good place to go, or give you a list of placements or anything like that, because then if we start to recommend things, we can't recommend things without having checked them. Checking them costs money. It is possible for the school to buy into a service where they will give you lists of placements that have been checked for health and safety and safeguarding issues, all those sorts of things, but there's a massive cost for 330 Year 10 and 180 Year 12 to go out on job shadowing in the summer, and we just can't afford that. So by having a private arrangement where the onus is on the students and the families to make sure that they're happy with a placement, then we can go ahead with this. If you're happy, the placement can happen. The school won't say, sorry, that's not good enough. You're arranging the placement, it's a private arrangement. We're just saying take it in that week, 10th to the 14th of July. Naturally though, you should ask questions about, does the placement have insurance? Has it done any risk assessments? For students that are Year 10, legislation says that there ought to be somebody who's had a DBS check, a disclosure and barring service check. Now, all of this is about being sensible. If a student gets a job placement with somebody who you have known for 10 or 15 years, you know the business, you know there's no risk, and you're very happy for your child to go to that placement, but maybe they're a sole trader, somebody who works on their own, so they don't have the insurance in place, and they certainly don't have a DBS, but you're really happy for them to go to this placement, that's fine. You can do that. The school is not making any checks on health and safety or insurance. But if your student is going somewhere that you don't know anything about, and maybe there is some sort of unknown hazard there that you can't quite measure, but you think there might be an issue, maybe it's a garage or something like that, maybe it's a big chain like Quick Fit, and your kid's got a place there, then really you ought to ask Quick Fit, well, can you show me your insurance documents? Is there a risk assessment that you have for trainees? And is there somebody in your organisation, it doesn't have to be the direct supervisor, but there should be somebody who's had a DBS check. That's all mentioned on the paperwork, which you'll see. And on the paperwork there's link to guidance, so you can go and see what you should be looking for when you're looking at a placement. But the bottom line is, it's a private arrangement. It's between you and the business, and if you and your child are happy with the arrangements, the school will not stop you going on it, because the school will is not taking any responsibility for this. We're not doing any checks or follow-up. It's totally down to you guys. So here's the scheme of things. Back in October, just before half term, I did an assembly about this. to explain it to the students, and they could have come home and started talking to you about it, which I hope they did. They've been doing work in PSD, and last week in the Futures afternoon they started work on CVs, and we gave them a little booklet to help them think through the process they needed to go through and give them some guidance on researching job shadowing placements. I'm now 15th of November delivering this to you, explaining it to you, and you should have had today sent to you a frequently asked questions sheet, a copy of the form, and the booklet that the kids have had in school to work through. The students will be given a hard copy of the form. It has two sides. It's going to be really important to have both sides filled out. And the deadline for bringing it back, well, that's the half term in the spring, in February. That is so many months away from when the actual job shadowing is in July, I know, but by getting a hurry on now, it's more likely that students will be successful. The early bird that catches the worm, they'll get in there and get the placements that they want, rather than scraping around at the end. It doesn't mean that the forms can't come in after that, and they can of course be handed in beforehand, and we usually are chasing the last few stragglers right up until the last minute and giving them a lot of support, which is why we are very successful about getting people out. But as it's a private arrangement, it's about you and your networks and getting your students into a placement. So quick bit on some myth busting. Some companies say, oh no, can't do a job placement. They're not barred. Companies are not prevented by law from taking kids under the age of 16, but they could say no, and if it's a very hazardous environment. There may be national rules about barring students of that age for that particular workplace. The company's insurers, they may say, sorry, you are not insured, we can't afford to pay for a trainee, we don't take trainees. That may be correct. It might not be their policy, but we know exceptions have been made, so be politely pushy. I'll give you an example. Veterinary practices don't usually take students under the age of 17. They usually only take sixth formers. One year there was a student whose family friends ran a vet. The vet wanted to give them the work experience. They rang me up and talked about it, and I said, you can take them as long as you're happy. So they did the risk assessment, and they said, right, the student can do this, this and this, but they can't do that. They put it all in place, and they took a student in year 10 to do work experience, job shadowing, in a place which normally would say no. So if you can work with the company and explain to them, well, this is only job shadowing, our child doesn't have to do everything. If you can be clear about what they can do and what they can't, they can just observe in some cases, but maybe they could be given some things to do. It's about that negotiation. I'm sure you can make a headway. So yeah, be politely pushy. Safety is very important. So primarily, and this is the law, students on a work experience placement, job shadowing placement, they are not the school's responsibility while they're at that placement. They are counted as employees of the placement provider. So it's the employees that have primary responsibility for the safety. They have to make sure that everything is okay. That is why, and I would really emphasize this, you should ask to see or have reference for the employer's liability insurance. They should be able to send you a photocopy, a PDF, or a photograph of their certificate, which means that if anything does go wrong, they're covered. That, I say, would be absolute priority. But it's a private arrangement, and if you decide to allow your child to go to a situation where there is no liability insurance, which can happen with sole traders, it's your decision, and the school will not prevent the child from doing that placement. If you do have a concern about anything hazardous, you ought to ask questions. Have they done a risk assessment? Does your child need to have any PPE? Will they provide it, or do you have to source it yourself? And on placement, I'll give a briefing before students go, but I will emphasize to them that if they're asked to do something which they are unsure about, or they consider it a threat to themselves, they should decline it, and they should let the school know, just in case we need to speak to the placement. They should certainly talk to you, and maybe you could talk to the placement as well. So of course you can go anywhere. We're not going to provide a list of names of places to go. I'm sure you're already thinking about places that your child might contact or would like to go to. That's just some examples. We want to get this sorted as soon as possible, so there's a booklet, and they've been given hard copy, and it will be put on Satchel for them, and I'll include there the other two pieces of information that will have been emailed to you, the frequently asked questions document and the form, so we're getting it out on all channels to you. The child needs to think about what suits them best. They should have prepared a CV, so if the work placement asks to see something, they've got something. That could be leverage. If they're just going to do a cold contact and walk up and down the high street or up and down the Sherwood estate, knocking on doors saying, can you give me some work experience, having a smart CV to hand into the manager would be maybe a bit of leverage. The manager sees a smart CV and say, well, actually this kid looks organized. I'll take a closer look. I might be persuaded. Obviously got to research possibilities and then start asking, and it's going to take a lot of asking, and it may take a lot of knockbacks when people turn you down and say no, going back a second time, sending an email, following the email up with a phone call. Can I just ask, did you get an email? Can I ask who the email went to, who's actioning that, who's dealing with it? Could you give me a phone number, a name I could talk to? Just that politely pushing us to get the placement. You've got networks out there, places you work, friends, neighbours. The internet, massive resource, but just finding out the information is not always the solution. You've got to get in there and ask. Now, sometimes students get an offer of a placement, but it's not in that week. And an example might be big companies, typically JLR are like this. They say, we do work placements in these weeks. And students have gone on those, and because they're very prestigious, we don't turn students down. We do say that's okay, go on that, it's a justified absence, that's fine, but it doesn't mean that the week when everybody else is on job shadowing placement is a holiday for you. You will have to get a placement in those 5 days as well. That sounds tough, doesn't it? But it's not a time off. If you do manage to get a placement, and some kids get some really interesting placements, sometimes in other parts of the country, sometimes abroad even because of their network, we still need a placement activity, engaging activity for the 10th to the 14th of July. So start looking. Students should have their CVs ready to hand out. The deadline is Friday the 17th of February. There's a bit of a screenshot of the form, what it will look like. You'll have had that on an email. Kids have been given a hard copy, and it's on Satchel. I hope I've made things clear in this presentation. Thank you for giving your attention to it. You can email me, there it is. Most of you know who I am anyway. And all the best with looking for your placements, and any questions. Thank you very much.